Imagine having breakfast, lunch, and dinner every morning, and almost nothing you eat is what it seems. That brightly colored yogurt you open, the crispy chips you crave, even your favorite processed cheese, behind them lies a whole world of processing that no one talks about. Today, we'll tell you the stories of 21 foods we eat every day, unaware that they're made from what was once considered waste. Yes, you read that right, offcuts, scraps, skins, bones, grounds, pulp, and everything else that seems unappealing at first glance. But food industry technology transforms these things into products we perceive as ordinary food. Sausage, where the meat is what doesn't make it to the display case. Imagine a typical butcher's counter. Bright lights, neatly laid out cuts, perfect steaks, even slices, beautifully ground meat. Everything looks appetizing, almost like in an advertisement. But behind this image, there's another side, an invisible one that's not usually discussed out loud. When a carcass is butchered, not everything becomes a premium product. There are trimmings, small pieces of meat, fat, sinew, connective tissue. There are parts that don't look pretty, uneven, streaky, sometimes too tough. There are scraps left over from the cutting process, everything that can't simply be displayed and sold as steak. And this is where the real story of sausage begins. You might think, so what? It's still meat. And there's some truth to that. But there's a nuance. Sausage isn't just meat. This is a way to recycle something that would otherwise be much more difficult, if not impossible, to sell in its traditional form. At the factory, all these scraps are collected. They are ground into mince, sometimes so finely that the structure disappears completely. You can no longer see where the fat is, where the muscle tissue is, where the connective tissue is. Everything is transformed into a homogeneous mass. And that's where the magic begins. Salt, spices, sometimes flavor enhancers, stabilizers, water, or ice are added to this mass to achieve the desired texture. Sometimes starch or protein components are added to retain moisture and increase volume. All of this is thoroughly mixed, turning into the familiar sausage mass. Then it is placed in a casing, shaped, boiled, smoked, or dry. And the end result is the product we see on the shelf. A smooth, beautiful loaf of sausage with a pleasant aroma. And here's where the most interesting part happens. You no longer think about what it's made of, because the product has completely changed. It has a different taste, a different texture, a different appearance. It's no longer associated with offcuts. It's become something new. This is the main secret. Processing erases the origin. But let's look deeper. Why does this even exist? The answer is simple: efficiency. The food industry is designed to use raw materials as completely as possible. Throwing them away means losing money, and processing means creating a new product and making more money. And there's nothing evil or scary about this in itself. On the contrary, from an environmental perspective, it's even logical. Less waste, more use of resources. The problem only rises when people don't understand what they're eating, because sausages can be very different. There are high-quality options that use genuine good meat and a minimum of additives. And there are cheap products that use a minimal amount of real meat, and the rest is water, fat, fillers, and flavorings. And this is where the trust game begins. You look at the packaging. Doctors, Cervelat, traditional. The names evoke associations with something natural, time-tested. But the ingredients can tell a completely different story. Sometimes people wonder, why is sausage so soft? Why is it so juicy? The answer is often simple: it's because it has a lot of water, which is retained by additives. Or another point, have you ever noticed that cheap sausage sometimes has a slightly rubbery texture? This isn't a coincidence. It's the result of working with raw materials that wouldn't produce the desired consistency on their own. But there's another interesting psychological effect. If you give someone a piece of raw meat with tendons and say, "Eat it," they'll likely refuse. It looks unappetizing. It raises doubts. And now the same product, but processed, seasoned, beautifully presented, and it already seems delicious. We eat based on form, taste, and habit, not origin. And that's precisely why sausage has become one of the most popular foods in the world. It's convenient, tasty, has a long shelf life, and is relatively inexpensive. It's the perfect product for the industrial age. But there's an important point to understand. Sausage isn't clean meat. It's a processed product. And it should be treated as such, not as a staple of your diet, but as a convenient, albeit not ideal, option. Sometimes it's better to buy a piece of meat and cook it yourself, Sometimes it's better to choose a higher quality sausage with a clear ingredient list. And sometimes it's better to simply eat a sandwich mindfully and not harbor any illusions. Because knowledge changes attitude. When you understand how everything works, you begin to choose differently. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. And then sausage ceases to be a mystery and becomes simply a product with its pros and cons. But the most interesting thing is that sausage is just the beginning of this world of processed foods. And the next fact will definitely surprise you. Cheese made from the remains of dairy production. There's a feeling that cheese is almost sacred. Natural, ancient, milk, time, and a little magic. That's how it's presented to us. A pretty picture, a farm, cows, fresh air, a cheesemaker turning wheels of cheese by hand. But now let's look a little deeper, not at a village cheese factory, but at a modern production facility. When milk arrives at the factory, it has more than one destiny. It's used to make everything: cream, butter, cottage cheese, cheeses, yogurts, and here's the key: almost nothing goes to waste. Imagine the process. Milk is separated. The cream, the fatty part, is extracted. Skim milk remains separately. Then it's used to make cottage cheese or cheese. But it doesn't end there, because after cheese production, whey remains, that cloudy liquid that separates from the curd. It used to be considered practically waste. It could be fed to animals or simply thrown away. But then someone realized, wait, there's still a ton of good stuff in it. Proteins, lactose, minerals, and a new story began. Whey began to be processed. They make dry powders, concentrates, and supplements from it. It's used in sports nutrition, baked goods, and sauces. But the most interesting thing is that it returns back to cheese. Yes, you heard that right. Some types of cheese and cheese products are made using recycled dairy byproducts. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just another level of industrial logic. Don't throw anything away. Now, another layer to this. There are cheeses that aren't ripened for months, as in the classic tradition. They're made quickly, sometimes very quickly. They take raw milk, not always whole milk, add fats, proteins, stabilizers, and melting salts. It's all heated, mixed, and the result is a product that tastes like cheese. You've seen products like this. They melt perfectly. They stretch. They're always the same. It's convenient. It's cheap. It's stable. But this isn't the kind of cheese that lives and changes over time. It's a product assembled from parts. And here's where the fine line arises. On the one hand, it's rational. We use the maximum amount of what milk gives. We reduce waste. We make production cheaper. On the other hand, the very essence of the product changes. You're not just eating cheese, but the result of complex processing, a mixture of components, each of which was once part of something else. And again, the familiar effect kicks in. You don't see this process. You see a piece of cheese, neat, smooth, with a pleasant aroma. It melts on hot bread, stretches across pizza, and sits perfectly on a sandwich. And your brain says, it's cheese. But reality can be more complicated. Sometimes it's genuine cheese made using traditional technology, and sometimes it's a cheese product assembled from processed ingredients. And the difference between them isn't always obvious to taste, especially if you're used to one type. That's why people are often surprised when they read the ingredients. Unfamiliar words, additives, and milk fat substitutes appear. And the question arises, what am I even eating? The answer is that you're eating a food processed product. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it requires understanding, because there's a huge difference between cheese that's been aged for months and one that's been assembled in a few hours. One is the process and time. The other is the technology and efficiency. And again, it all comes down to choice. If you want real flavor, look for a simple formula: milk, starter culture, enzymes, salt. If you want convenience and affordability, the industry has already figured it all out for you. But the most interesting thing is that many don't even notice the difference, because taste can be customized, and habit is even easier. And now you're eating the product every day without even thinking about how it came to be. And that's just the beginning, because the next product pretends to be something it's not, and you've definitely eaten it. Crab-free crab sticks, recycled fish trimmings. If you were given a crab stick to try with your eyes closed and asked, "Is that crab?" you'd probably hesitate, but then answer, yes. The flavor is too convincing. The texture is too familiar. But here's the truth that confuses many. Most crab sticks don't contain crab at all. And this isn't a literal deception, it's more of an illusion. Perfected. Let's start with the basics. Crab sticks are made from surimi. This Japanese word translates as ground fish, but not just any fish specifically, the parts that weren't used to make a beautiful fillet. Imagine the process of cutting up a fish. The best pieces go into steaks, fillets, and expensive products. And what's left? Small trimmings, irregularly shaped pieces, leftover meat that's difficult to sell separately. Previously, this would have been waste. Today, it's raw material. These scraps are thoroughly washed, freed of bones, skin, and excess fat. Then they're ground into a smooth paste. So smooth that you can't even tell what kind of fish it's made from. And here's where the real transformation begins. Salt, sugar, starch, proteins, and flavorings are added to this mixture. Sometimes natural, sometimes synthetic. Dyes are added to create that signature crab hue, white on the inside and reddish on the outside. Then it's all formed, heated, and the result is a product that looks and behaves like crab meat. It flakes, it's firm, it's slightly sweet, it's convincing. And here's where the interesting thing comes in. Our brains are easily fooled when three factors are in sync: texture, taste, and appearance. If all of these factors are present, we don't ask unnecessary questions. You open the package, see neat little sticks, add them to your salad, or just eat them. And you don't think about the fact that these are processed fish scraps, transformed into a new product. And you know what? There's nothing dangerous about that in itself. Surimi is still fish, just processed, sometimes even quite high quality, if the manufacturer doesn't skimp on raw materials. But there's a catch. The cheaper the product, the more additives it contains, not fish, starch, flavor enhancers, and flavorings. All of this helps to stretch the product to the desired taste and texture. And then you're no longer eating fish as much as an imitation. It's like a movie with good special effects. You realize it's not real, but while you're watching, you believe it. Interestingly, the idea of surimi isn't new. It's been used in Japan for hundreds of years. It was a way to preserve fish and use everything without leaving anything behind. But the modern version is a high-tech product. Global, mass-produced, perfectly standardized. Every stick is identical. Every flavor is predictable, and that's precisely why they're so popular. They're cheap, convenient, have a long shelf life, and go well with almost everything. Salads, wraps, appetizers. But behind this simplicity lies an entire industry of transformation. What was once considered leftovers is transformed into a product sold around the world as a delicacy. And again, it all comes down to perception. You buy crab sticks, but what you get is a fish product with the aroma of crab. And if you understand this, everything falls into place. You're not being deceived. You simply know what you're eating. And that's a whole new level of relationship with food. But the most interesting part is yet to come, because the next product is made from something that was previously considered garbage. And you use it almost every day. The Willen cubes made from the concentrate of what's usually thrown away. There's one thing that can transform ordinary water into a rich soup in a second. A tiny cube. Unassuming, almost unnoticeable, but as soon as it dissolves, the kitchen fills with a scent as if you've been simmering broth for hours. Sounds like magic, but let's look at what this magic is actually made of. When meat and vegetable production is underway, a huge amount of waste remains that doesn't make it into the main product. Bones, trimmings, peels, stems, vegetable scraps that didn't pass muster for appearance. If all this is simply thrown away, it's a colossal waste. And then an idea rises. What if we could squeeze the maximum flavor out of it? A process long familiar in professional kitchens begins. Making broth. But in industrial settings, it's taken to the extreme. All these scraps are collected and stored in huge containers. There they cook for a long time. A very long time. Hours. Sometimes under pressure. The goal is to extract everything. Taste, aroma, extractive substances. From the bones comes richness. From the meat comes flavor. From the vegetables comes aroma. The result is a concentrated broth. So concentrated that you can't drink it straight, it's too strong. And here comes the next step. This broth is evaporated. The water is removed. It's turned into a thick mass, and then into a dry concentrate. It all seems logical, but now let's add another layer. To ensure a stable and recognizable flavor, Salt is added to the mixture, lots of it. It's both a preservative and a flavor enhancer. Fat is added to give richness. Spices are added to create the desired profile. Flavor enhancers are added to make the flavor more intense than it actually is. And here's where things get interesting. A real broth is a soft, complex flavor that develops gradually. And a bouillon cube packs a punch. Bright, instant, rich. It doesn't open up, it delivers the full effect right away. And that's exactly why it's so appealing. You drop the cube into the water, and within a minute you feel like you've been cooking for a long time and with care. It's convenience, it's speed, it's control. But behind this lies the processing of something that wasn't originally intended as a finished product. And again, a familiar picture emerges. What was once considered waste is transformed into a concentrated flavor. And you use it without thinking. You add it to soup, to sauce, to garnish, and you can't even imagine how many different components have come together in this little cube. It's also interesting how perception changes. Try to imagine. You're handed a pot of bones, vegetable peelings, and scraps. It hardly looks appetizing. And now you have the same taste, but neatly packaged in a cube. It's a completely different story. Formation changes perception. But there's a downside, too. Due to the high concentration of salt and additives, such products can easily overwhelm the palate. You become accustomed to the brightness, and ordinary food begins to taste bland. It's like constantly listening to music at maximum volume. Silence no longer feels normal, and suddenly you don't even notice how you're adding a cube, not because you need it, but because it's not tasty without it. Although, in fact, the flavor could have been created differently, more slowly, but more naturally. And again, it all comes down to choice. A bouillon cube isn't evil, it's a tool. But it's important to understand how it works and what it's made of, because behind this small piece lies a whole history of processing, concentration, and amplification. And, as you're beginning to notice, this repeats itself over and over again. We take the leftovers, amplify them, change their form, and get a new product. But the next point takes things to a whole new level. Because it's not just the leftovers that are being processed there, but the parts that many people don't even want to think about. Gelatin, a dessert made from bones, skin, and tendons. There's something almost magical about jelly. It trembles on the plate, melts in your mouth, and is bright, sweet, and festive. Children adore it, and adults are nostalgic about it. Everything looks light, almost airy. But now imagine a different picture. Bones, skin, tendons. Sounds completely different, doesn't it? And here begins one of the most amazing processes in the food industry: the transformation of tough, coarse animal parts into a delicate dessert. When an animal is processed, the best cuts of meat are sold. That's obvious, but what remains is a huge amount of what's not fit for direct consumption. Bones, skin, cartilage, ligaments. This used to be a problem. Today, it's a resource, because these parts contain collagen. Collagen is a protein responsible for tissue strength. It makes skin elastic, tendons strong, and bones bound together into a single structure. But if processed correctly, it turns into something completely different. The process begins with cleaning. All these bones and skins are thoroughly washed, processed, and any excess is removed. Then they are ground and sent through a lengthy process, sometimes acidic, sometimes alkaline. This is necessary to break down the structure and prepare the collagen for extraction. Sounds like chemistry already, because it is. After this, the raw materials are boiled. For a long time, a very long time. Gradually, the collagen is released into the water. It dissolves and turns into a thick, sticky liquid. If you've ever made jellied meat, you've seen it with your own eyes. That very moment when the broth cools and begins to solidify. This is gelatin in its natural form. But in industry, everything goes further. The resulting mass is filtered, purified, and bleached. The odor, impurities, and all unnecessary elements are removed. Then it is dry and turned into powder or transparent sheets. And now it no longer resembles bones or leather. It's a pure, neutral product. Tasteless, odorless, almost without history. And that's precisely why it's so versatile. You add it to a dessert and it makes it firm. You add it to yogurt and it thickens. You add it to candies and they acquire that very chewy texture. It's everywhere, and you hardly notice it. The most interesting thing is the contrast. The original raw material is hard, rough, unappealing. The result is soft, delicate, pleasant. It's almost alchemy. And once again, the familiar mechanism kicks in. If you were shown the original material, you'd hardly want to eat it. But in its processed form, you eat it with pleasure. Because the form has changed, the taste has changed, the context has changed, and the brain says, this is dessert. It's also interesting how gelatin has become a part of everyday food. It's not just in Jell-O, it's in marmalade, marshmallows, some yogurts, desserts, even some meat products. You can eat it every day and not even know it. And here's where the important point comes in. Gelatin isn't a bad product. It's a protein. It can even be beneficial in certain quantities. But it's important to understand its origins, because this is again a story about how waste is transformed into a product. And not just a product, it's the basis of an entire food category. And this is perhaps one of the most illustrative examples of how far recycling can go. From what seemed unnecessary, something becomes beloved. And this slightly changes your perspective on familiar things. You begin to understand, food isn't always what it seems. Sometimes a simple product has a long, complex, and unexpected story behind it. And if this fact has already surprised you, it gets even more interesting. Margarine, a product born from oil processing waste. Margarine was once considered a true breakthrough. Inexpensive, readily available, with a long shelf life, and easy to spread, the perfect replacement for butter. It was touted as a modern solution, a product of the future. But its story doesn't begin in the kitchen. It begins with a challenge. How to use what's left over after oil processing. When vegetable oils are produced, sunflower, soybean, canola, the process doesn't end with a pure product. Various fractions remain, less stable fats, byproducts, substances that don't look like the finished product on their own. And here's where the idea rises. Can something new be created from this? But there's a problem. Liquid butter isn't butter in the traditional sense. You can't spread it on bread. It doesn't hold its shape. It doesn't provide the sensation people expect. And that's where technology comes in. To turn liquid butter into a solid, it must be altered at the molecular level. And this is how the process of hydrogenation occurs. Simply put, hydrogen is built into the butter. The structure of the fatty acids changes. The liquid becomes denser. This creates the consistency you can cut with a knife. And now you're looking at margarine, not butter. But that's just the beginning, because this mass itself is neutral. It doesn't have the distinct flavor or aroma of butter. It's just fat. And then everything else is added. Flavorings to create a creamy smell. Colorings to give it a warm, yellowish color. Salt to give it a familiar taste. Emulsifiers to maintain a stable texture. And the end result is a product that looks and feels very similar to butter. But inside, it's a completely different story. Interestingly, for a long time, margarine was considered even healthier than butter. It was promoted as a lighter, more modern product. But later it was discovered that some technologies, especially partial hydrogenation, lead to the formation of trans fat substances that can negatively impact health. And then the industry changed again. Technology changed. New processing methods emerged. Manufacturers began removing or reducing trans fats. But the essence remained the same. Margarine is a product assembled from processed fats, brought to the desired form and flavor. And again, we see a familiar pattern. You take something that is not originally a finished product. You apply technology, you add ingredients, and a new reality is created. You spread it on bread and you don't think about the molecular changes, the processing, or the origin. You just taste it. And that's what it all hinges on. Because taste is the final destination. Before it's a difficult journey. After it's a habit. It's also interesting how much context influences things. Tell someone, these are processed fats with a modified structure, and they'll be wary. Tell them, this is soft sandwich butter, and they'll calmly put it on their bread. Same facts, different presentation, different perception. And that's perhaps the main lesson of all these products. We don't just eat food, we eat the idea of it. Margarine isn't just a substitute for butter. It's an example of how far the food industry can go in creating alternatives, sometimes convenient, sometimes controversial, but always thoughtfully crafted. And if you think this is the limit of recycling, the next product will show that you can go even further and literally rescue a failed product by transforming it into something new. Processed cheese made from failed cheeses. There's one product that always behaves perfectly. It melts without a hitch. It doesn't separate. It's always the same today, tomorrow, a month from now. Processed cheese. On a sandwich, soft, In a burger stretchy, in soup dissolves without a trace, and it seems as if it's simply more convenient than regular cheese. But its story doesn't begin with convenience, but with a problem. Imagine cheese production, huge batches, different types, different storage conditions, and the inescapable fact, not every cheese turns out perfect. Somewhere the texture is off, somewhere the taste isn't as expected, somewhere it's approaching its expiration date. Toss it out. Too expensive. And then an idea appeared that changed everything. What if you melt down a failed cheese? That's how processed cheese was born in the early 20th century. It was a brilliant move. Take existing cheeses and create a new product with a guaranteed result. The process goes something like this. Various cheeses are used offcuts, leftovers, chunks that weren't sold as a separate product. They are chopped and mixed. Then special melting salts are added. This is the key. They change the protein structure, causing the cheese to become homogeneous when heated. Without them, the cheese would simply melt unevenly. Fat in some places, lumps in others. With them, a smooth, creamy mass is created. Next, butter or cream is added for softness. Sometimes, powdered milk is added to stabilize the composition. Sometimes, flavorings are added to achieve the perfectly cheesy taste. All of this is heated and mixed until completely homogeneous. And now, before you, it's no longer the remains of different cheeses, but a new product. Predictable, stable, convenient. And here's where the magic of perception happens again. You don't see exactly what cheeses it's made from. You don't know how many different batches were mixed together. You don't feel the failure of the original product. You just eat processed cheese, and it's good. Sometimes even tastier than regular cheese, because its flavor can be customized, made softer, creamier, brighter. It's like a remix in music. They take different tracks, combine them, improve them, and the result is a hit. Interestingly, processed cheese was originally a solution for extending shelf life. It spoils less, is easier to transport, and remains stable longer. And that's precisely why it became so popular. The military, travel, fast food, everything needs a product that won't let you down. And it doesn't. But there's a catch. The cheaper the processed cheese, the less real cheese it contains and the more additives. Sometimes these aren't just processed cheeses, but a mixture of dairy components, fats, and flavorings, fine-tuned to achieve the desired taste. And again, the same question arises. Is it cheese? Or something else? The answer is somewhere in the middle. It's a cheese-based product, but processed, altered, optimized. And therein lies its strength. It solves problems that regular cheese doesn't do well, but it also moves away from its primary form. And again, it all comes down to understanding. If you know what you're eating, you choose consciously. If not, you're simply following habit. And habit is the most powerful thing in food, because it forms unnoticed. Today you grab processed cheese just in case. Tomorrow because it's convenient. And then because it tastes better. And then it becomes part of your diet, even though once it was simply a way to save a product from being written off. And this only reinforces the main point. In the food industry, almost nothing goes to waste. Everything finds a new form, sometimes an unexpected one. And the next point will prove this once again, because they even use fruits you would never buy yourself. Fast food patties made from meat trimmings and ground up leftovers. Every time you open a hamburger package or sit down at a fast food restaurant, it seems like a perfectly formed patty in front of you. Smooth, juicy, and delicious. It's advertised as shiny, with a perfect crust on the grill, making it seem like a single piece of meat. But the reality is a little different. At large meat processing plants, the meat isn't always sold whole as steak or in chunks. There are leftovers, trimmings, small pieces, sinewy cuts, and parts that are difficult to cut beautifully. None of this can be sold as a premium product, but throwing it away is expensive and wasteful. And that's where fast food comes in. These leftovers are ground mechanically, sometimes along with fat, to make the patty juicy. The result is a homogeneous mass. It's called ground meat, and it's at this stage that the magic begins. The minced meat can be formed, mixed, and standardized. Next, salt, spices, and sometimes starch or textured proteins are added. All this makes the patty stable. It won't fall apart on the grill, won't dry out too quickly, and will taste consistent in every restaurant. Then the minced meat is pressed into a patty shape. These are perfectly even circles that fit perfectly into a bun. They are then fried or frozen, and the result is a product that's completely ready for fast food. There's a surprising aspect here. Taste expectations are formed almost instantly. The juicy flavor, the aroma of fried meat, the perfect texture. You eat it and think, wow, meat. But in reality, it's not a whole piece of meat, but carefully processed scraps, collected and refined by the industry. It's interesting that technology allows for safe and predictable patties. Safe because the minced meat is heat-treated. Predictable because the taste is consistent every time, which is important for large chains. But there's also a psychological aspect. We're used to trusting form. If a patty is smooth, juicy, and looks right, our brain thinks it's high-quality meat. But in reality, we're eating the result of processed leftovers, flavor enhancers, and technology. And this again demonstrates one principle. The food industry knows how to transform waste into a product we love and perceive as regular meat. And if you're surprised that it works so reliably, hold on, because the next point about canned fish will make an even stronger impression. They process parts that would never make it into premium fish. Juices from ugly fruits that didn't pass muster. Imagine a supermarket display. Rows of apples perfectly round, shiny, as if polished. Oranges even, bright, and uniform in size. Everything looks as if nature has suddenly become a perfectionist. But reality is quite different. Real fruit is different. Crooked, blemished, unevenly skinned. Sometimes too small, sometimes too big. And that's where the cruel filter comes in appearance. A huge amount of fruit simply doesn't make it to the shelves. Not because it's bad, but because it's wrong. Too crooked, wrong color, small imperfections. You could eat them. They could be sweet, juicy, even tastier than the perfect ones, but you won't see them because they go to processing. And it's from these fruits that juices are often made. At first glance, this seems logical, even good. Less waste, more resource utilization. And indeed, it is. But let's look deeper. When fruit is being juiced, its appearance no longer matters. It will still be crushed, chopped, and filtered. And that's where the opportunity for blending comes in. Different batches, different varieties, different degrees of ripeness. All of this is combined into a single stream. Then the juice undergoes processing, pasteurization, filtration, sometimes the removal of pulp, sometimes, on the contrary, the addition of pulp. And here's where the fun begins. Many of the juices you buy aren't straight from a single apple. They're a reconstituted product. First, the fruit is concentrated water. It's removed to make the juice easier to store and transport. The result is a thick, rich mass. And then, the water is added back. Yes, that's right. The concentrate is diluted with water to the desired consistency. Flavorings are added to restore the flavor, which is partially lost during processing. And the result is juice that seems natural, but it's already been through a long process. And the same effect kicks in again. You drink the juice and imagine fresh fruit, an orchard, sun, a tree. But the reality is a mixture of different fruits, processed and regenerated. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. On the contrary, it allows you to use what would otherwise be thrown away. But there's a catch. When everything is mixed and standardized, individuality disappears. Every package of juice is the same. Every sip is predictable. You no longer taste the differences between seasons, varieties, and characteristics. You get a consistent taste. And that's convenient. But it's not the same experience as eating a fruit and feeling its character. It's also interesting how much packaging influences things. A box labeled 100% juice. A picture of a juicy orange. Drops, shine, freshness, and the brain fills in the rest. Even though the product inside may have gone through dozens of processing stages. And again, we return to the main idea. Processing isn't evil. It's a tool. It allows you to preserve food, reduce waste, and make food more accessible. But it also creates the illusion of simplicity. You think you're drinking just juice, but in reality, it's the result of a complex chain of decisions. And if you understand this, you begin to see everyday things differently. Sometimes you choose juice and that's okay. And sometimes you take the fruit and eat it whole, because now you know the difference. And this knowledge changes everything. But it gets even more interesting, because the next product is a classic, loved by millions, even though it's made from something rarely shown in advertising. Canned fish from non-premium parts. When you pick up a can of tuna or soy at the supermarket, you see meat, even fish, cut into perfect pieces. The image that comes to mind is fresh fish, straight from the boat, packed in its own juices. But behind that can lies a whole history of processing. Fishing operations sort their catch. The best pieces are filleted, steaked, dry, or frozen for the premium segment. And what's left? Trimmings, tails, heads, backs, small fish that aren't the right size or shape. Throwing it all away. Economically unthinkable. And then the industrial magic begins. These parts are processed. Bones are removed. They are ground, sometimes mixed with other batches, and salt, oil, or water are added to create a consistency suitable for packaging. Preservatives and spices are sometimes added to extend shelf life and stabilize the flavor. The result is a product that looks like regular canned fish. The meat is smooth, dense, and flavorful. You don't notice that it once contained tails and heads, or that it's a mixture of different parts of one or even several fish. And again, the familiar effect is at work. The brain trusts shape and color. We see a piece of fish and think it's a whole, select product, when in fact, it's the result of processing what was previously considered waste. Interestingly, such canned fish is not only just as good, but sometimes even tastier. The mixing of different parts creates a richness, texture, and character rarely found in premium fillets. Plus, this technology offers convenience. Canned fish has a long shelf life, is easy to transport, and is always ready to eat. So once again we see how something once considered unsuitable is transformed into a product we eat almost daily and perceive as ordinary. But if you thought only meat and fish undergo such processing, get ready for the next point. Bread made from leftover grains will surprise you even more. Bread made from flour obtained from grain residues. When we think of bread, we imagine a golden crust, a fluffy texture, and the aroma of a freshly baked loaf. It seems like an ordinary product that appears on our tables every day. But behind this ordinary appearance lies a whole world of processing. The grain from which flour is made is sorted. The best grains are used for premium bread, baked goods, and confectionery. And what's left? Large and small fragments, unripe or cracked grains, and fine husks. All of this is commonly referred to as byproducts or waste. And here's where things get interesting. These imperfect parts of the grain still contain starch, protein, and fiber. They aren't thrown away, they're processed into flour. Sometimes they're a separate, second-grade flour. Sometimes they're added to the main flour mix. This flour has its own characteristics. It's slightly coarser, has a different flavor, and sometimes a denser texture. But when combined with yeast, water, salt, and oven temperature, it transforms into bread that looks perfect. Here's the amazing thing. We're eating a product that may contain 30 to 50% ingredients that were previously unsuitable for direct sale, but the taste and appearance are completely transformed. Our brain perceives as regular bread because the shape, aroma, and texture match our expectations. This processing is not only economical, but also environmentally friendly. It maximizes resource use, reducing waste in production. Moreover, some types of whole grain bread are even made from this processed flour, adding fiber and nutrients. Again, a familiar principle. The original raw material seems unappealing, but technology and craftsmanship transform it into a product we eat every day, barely considering its origins. But if you thought recycling was limited to grain and meat, get ready. The next point about potato chips will show how waste can become a favorite snack for millions. Potato chips. Every time you open a bag of potato chips and hear that crunch, it seems like they're simply thinly sliced potatoes fried in oil. Appetizing, beautiful, familiar. But the reality is a little more complicated. Potatoes are sorted industrially. The best tubers are sold as table potatoes for French fries or processed into fresh produce. And what's left? Small, uneven, cracked, damaged potatoes, those that don't pass beauty standards. And it's precisely from these wastes that chips are often made. They're washed, peeled, and sometimes cut into perfect shapes using machines. The result is a smooth slice that looks like a regular product. But the technology doesn't stop at the cutting. To ensure the chips are equally crispy, beautiful, and delicious, they undergo processing. Sometimes they're blanched, sometimes oils and spices are added, and flavorings and salt are added. This creates the consistent flavor and color we know and love. Interestingly, the original raw material is almost unrecognizable. You're presented with a packaged product that seems perfect, even though it's actually made from tubers no one would want to buy whole. And again, the psychology of perception is at work. Shape, smell, and taste create a sense of quality, even though it all started as leftovers. Thus, chips become an example of how waste can be transformed into a favorite snack for millions of people. And now we'll move on to an even more unexpected product found in every home: drinks made from fruit scraps. Fruit drinks from pomace and peels. When you drink packaged juice or fruit drink, you imagine fresh fruit, straight from the tree. The bright color, aroma, and flavor all scream natural, but behind that box lies a whole world of processing. After fruit has undergone the primary processing for juice or preserves, waste remains: pulp, peels, cores, and pits that are not fit for sale whole. Previously, this was considered garbage. Today, it's a resource. These residues are collected and pressed. The result is a puree or pulp, which still contains a wealth of beneficial substances, fiber, vitamins, and aromatic compounds. This is the raw material for drinks that don't require a perfect appearance. Next, processing begins. Juices are extracted from the pulp, mixed with water and sugar. Acids and flavorings are added. Vitamins are sometimes added to restore or enhance the natural content. The result is a drink that looks and tastes like fresh juice. The brain perceives it as natural, although in reality, it consists of processed residues and additives. And this again demonstrates the principle: waste becomes the basis of a product we consume every day, unaware of its origin. The next product is even more surprising: sweets made from leftover syrups and fruit pulp. Candies and marmalades made from fruit pomace and syrups. Every time you pick up marmalade or soft fruit candies, it seems like they're simply sweets made from fresh berries and fruits. The bright color, aroma, and firm texture all scream natural and delicious. But behind this lies the recycling of what was originally considered waste. After juice and compote production, the remaining pulp, peel, cores, and seeds is left behind. Instead of throwing them away, they're recycled. The residual juice is extracted from the pulp, sometimes boiled into syrup, and sugar, pectin, or gelatin are added. The result is a base for sweets that become soft, chewy, and delicious. Colorings and flavorings make the product even more appealing. The brain associates the bright color and smell with a favorite fruit, although in reality, the resulting product is a mixture of processed pomace, concentrates, and additives. Thus, the sweets we eat every day are often made from what would once have been simply thrown away. This is economical, delicious, and environmentally friendly, but also illustrates the power of food technology to transform waste into everyday products. Yogurts and milk drinks from dairy byproducts. Every day, millions of people open a jar of yogurt and think, fresh milk and culture's all natural. The taste is pleasant, the texture is delicate, and the aroma is mild. But behind this familiar product lies the processing of parts of milk that were once considered inferior. The production of cream, cheese, and butter leaves behind whale liquid rich in protein, lactose, and minerals. Previously, it was either discarded or fed to livestock. Today, this whey is used as a raw material for yogurts, drinks, and even sports nutrition. The process is as follows. The whey is concentrated, sometimes fortified with proteins or vitamins, mixed with milk, and cultures and flavorings are added. The result is a product with a familiar texture and taste. We drink this yogurt, thinking of its freshness and naturalness, but in reality, we're eating processed leftovers transformed into a healthy and delicious product. This is another example of how food technology uses waste to create everyday foods. And the next product will demonstrate that even what's usually thrown away after making broth, meat, and vegetable concentrates for soups and sauces is recycled. Sauces and soup concentrates from leftover broth and vegetables. When you open a can of ready-made soup or a packaged concentrate to water, it seems like it's simply a natural broth with vegetables. But in fact, the product begins with the processing of what was previously considered waste. After butchering meat, bones, sinews, and trimmings remain, which are not sold as finished meat. After making soup or broth, even more waste remains: water with dissolved substances, vegetable and meat scraps. Instead of throwing these away, food technology transforms them into a concentrate. To process, the leftovers are cooked until the flavor is maximally intensified, filtered, the water evaporated, and a thick paste is obtained. Salt, spices, and flavor enhancers are sometimes added to ensure a stable product. This concentrate is then packaged in jars, cubes, or powder. The result is a product that quickly and easily transforms water into a rich soup. You drink it every day, thinking of fresh broth, but in reality it is processed leftovers, transformed into a finished product using technology. Cooking oils from recycled vegetable fats. We use oil every day for frying, salads, and baking, and it seems like a natural product. But many vegetable oils, especially inexpensive ones, are processed from the leftovers from the production of premium oils. When sunflower, soybean, or canola oils are made, the best fractions are used for direct consumption or in high-quality cooking. What's left? Byproducts, less pure fats, and residues from filtration and pressing. Instead of discarding them, these parts are processed into base oil. The process includes cleaning, filtration, and sometimes refining and deodorization to remove odors and impurities and make the oil neutral. Antioxidants are sometimes added to extend shelf life. The end result is a product that tastes and colors almost identical to virgin oil. So we use recycled vegetable fats every day, without realizing that they are derived from what was once considered waste. The next point will show how processed bone and meat scraps end up in sausages and hot dogs products we eat every day. Sausages and hot dogs made from processed meat scraps. Every time we buy hot dogs or sausages, we imagine whole meat, carefully sliced and seasoned. It tastes juicy, flavorful, and feels natural. But behind this lies an entire waste recycling industry. Meat processing plants are left with scraps, trimmings, sinewy pieces, and parts that aren't sold as fillets. Instead of throwing them away, they're processed for sausage production. To process, the scraps are ground into mince, then salt, spices, sometimes starch, protein supplements, and water are added. Everything is thoroughly mixed until smooth. The mince is then stuffed into casings and heat-treated, boiled, smoked, or baked. The end result is a product that looks, smells, and behaves like whole meat sausage, even though most of it is processed scraps. Once again, the psychological effect is at work. The shape and taste create the feeling of a familiar product, concealing the origin of the raw materials. Cookies and bakery products made from flour and grain scraps. Every day, we eat cookies, buns, and pastries without thinking about where the flour comes from. But some of these products are made from grain processing scraps that weren't sold as premium flour. After sorting the grain, mills retain small fragments, cracked, or unripe grains that don't meet standards. Instead of throwing them away, they are processed into second-grade flour or blended with primary flour. Sometimes, scraps from other grains are added to improve the texture and nutritional value. Cookies, buns, and crackers are made from this flour. They taste and look just like products made from primary flour. The brain sees the beautiful shape, soft texture, and aroma, and perceives the product as ordinary. In this way, processed flour scraps become part of the daily diet of millions of people, integrating almost imperceptibly into familiar foods, drinks, and energy products made from coffee and tea grounds. Every day, millions of people drink coffee and tea, and some even energy drinks. It seems like the cup contains only fresh beans or leaves. But part of the industry uses recycled residues. After coffee is brewed, the remaining grounds and spent beans are removed. After tea is brewed, the leaves have lost most of their aroma and flavor. Previously, all of this went to waste. Today, they are used to make concentrates and extracts, and are added to energy drinks, bars, and dietary supplements. To process, spent leaves or beans are dried, sometimes roasted. The residual substances are extracted, fortified with vitamins or caffeine, and mixed with other ingredients. The result is products with a vibrant flavor and stimulating effect that, at first glance, appear fresh and natural. Thus, recycled coffee and tea residues are reintroduced into our diets, remaining almost unnoticeable. And if you think that's all, the next point will prove that even leftover vegetables and herbs can be turned into familiar seasonings, herbs and spices from vegetable and green scraps. Every day, we add salt, pepper, dried garlic, or mixed herbs to our dishes without even thinking about where they come from. But many seasonings are made from processed vegetables and herbs that weren't sold as fresh. After sorting and packaging, vegetables, trimmings, leaves, stems, and peels remain unsuitable for sale due to their shape or minor damage. Instead of throwing them away, they are dry, ground, and converted into powders, granules, or extracts. Sometimes they are mixed with other vegetables or spices to achieve a consistent flavor and aroma. The result is the familiar seasonings we use daily. The brain perceives them as the natural flavor of vegetables or herbs, although in fact, they are a byproduct of processed waste. This concludes our list of 21 waste products we eat every day, with little or no thought to the origin of the ingredients.